I still remember that night vividly. The night my life changed forever. Back then, I was just an 8-year-old girl, curled up in the back seat of an old car, clutching the stuffed bear I had never been apart from. The night sky was calm, a deep blue streaked with faint orange glows from the streetlights. I didn't feel uneasy because our destination was Grandma Eleanor's house, a place where I always felt safe. Grandma always welcomed me with a gentle smile, the warm scent of freshly baked cookies, and comforting hugs. Every visit to her house was special, because I knew she would tell me wonderful stories and let me touch her treasured collection of old books, something only I was allowed to do. But this time, things were different. The car came to a stop on the gravel road in front of her porch. I waited for my mother to turn and look at me, but she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Her face wasn't angry, nor was it sad, just cold in a way I couldn't understand. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, avoiding my gaze as if my very presence made him uncomfortable. Finally, my mother turned around, her voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. "We just need a little time to sort things out, Allison. Be a good girl and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" No further explanations, no promises of when they would return, not even a hug. I nodded, trying to be obedient, just like she expected. I still didn't realize something was wrong. I still believed that tomorrow or the day after they would come back for me. But as I stepped out of the car, dragging my small backpack with a few hastily packed clothes, Grandma Eleanor was already standing at the door, her eyes filled with sadness but still as gentle as ever. I turned back one last time. "Mom." The car was already pulling away. No wave goodbye. No one looked back. I ran after it for a few steps, my chest tightening as the taillights faded and disappeared down the road. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I hadn't yet understood that I had just been abandoned. Grandma Eleanor wrapped me in her arms, gently patting my back as if to reassure me. She didn't ask any questions, she simply led me inside, where the familiar scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air. She made me my favorite dinner, chicken noodle soup, but I just sat there staring at it, unable to take a bite. That night she read me a bedtime story, the same one I had heard countless times but still asked her to read again. Her voice was slow and soothing, but I couldn't focus. When the lights went out, I curled up in the warm bed, burying my face into my stuffed bear, waiting for the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. But the only sound outside was the wind. The next day I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the road in front of the house. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, the whole day. No one came. I kept waiting. A week passed. Every afternoon I sat there, watching every car that drove by. My heart leaped at the sound of an engine, only to sink again when I realized it was a stranger. 2 months. My parents still hadn't come back. When my classmates talked about their families, I just smiled and said nothing. I stopped asking Grandma Eleanor when they would return because I had begun to understand. They weren't coming back. But no matter how much I understood it logically, emotions were different. Every night, when the house grew silent, I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to stifle the quiet sobs that caught in my throat. I didn't want Grandma to hear, didn't want her to worry. But on some nights, she still came into my room, sitting at the edge of my bed, her wrinkled hand gently rubbing my back. "It's not your fault, Allison," she whispered. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, but that has nothing to do with you." I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But how could I when the truth kept haunting me, when the same question kept repeating in my mind? Why didn't they choose me? Grandma Eleanor was never one for flowery words or grand gestures of affection. But she loved me in her own way, with patience, with warm meals placed on the table every day, with simple yet profound lessons, and most of all, by never mentioning those who had abandoned me. Her house was small, nothing like the lavish mansions I had seen in magazines, but it was always warm. She had an old Toyota that she still drove, even though she could easily afford a newer one. The house had bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with the old books she cherished. Every morning, I would see her reading the financial section of the newspaper, sometimes nodding in approval at an article, sometimes furrowing her brows in thought. I didn't understand the numbers she read, but I knew that whenever she closed the paper and looked at me, her eyes always held pride. "Why do you like reading that stuff?" I once asked on a quiet morning, absent-mindedly stirring my cereal. She set her tea down, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "Because knowledge is power, Allison, and when you learn how to make money work for you, you'll never have to depend on anyone." At the time, I simply nodded, not fully grasping the weight of her words. But I didn't know then that the lessons she taught me that day would stay with me for the rest of my life. Under Grandma Eleanor's care, I slowly adapted to my new life. I stopped looking out the window every day, no longer waiting for a strange car to appear. She taught me how to bake cookies, how to tend to the small flower garden behind the house, how to think logically instead of letting emotions take control. And most importantly, she never once let me feel unloved. She was also the first to recognize my love for science. One day, when I was 9, she walked into the kitchen and found me experimenting with something. I had mixed baking soda and vinegar in a cup, eagerly watching as the bubbles fizzed over the rim. "Well," she said, crossing her arms as she observed, "looks like we have a scientist in the house." I looked up, my cheeks flushing slightly with embarrassment. "I was just trying something." She smiled. "Experimenting is the best way to learn, Allison. But if you want to create something bigger, perhaps we should do it the right way." The next day, she took me to a bookstore that specialized in children's science books and let me pick out anything I wanted. I chose a book about simple chemical reactions and a small experiment kit. She never said no when I asked for more books, and she never let me believe that anything was impossible. By the time I was 13, I had worked on a project about bacteria and how they reacted to their environment. I spent hours researching, experimenting, and recording results. When the state science fair approached, I nearly gave up, afraid that I wasn't good enough. But Grandma Eleanor wouldn't let me quit. "Allison, success isn't about never failing," she said, looking at me firmly. "It's about continuing even when you feel like giving up." Her words kept me standing. I didn't just participate in the competition, I won first place. As I stepped onto the stage to receive my trophy, I searched for her in the crowd. And when I saw her standing in the back row, her eyes filled with pride, I knew that every effort had been worth it. The years that followed passed peacefully, but Grandma Eleanor never stopped preparing me for my future. On my 18th birthday, she arranged a small dinner at our favorite restaurant. It wasn't anything extravagant, just my closest friends, a few old teachers, and people she considered family. After everyone had left, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, her voice warm. I opened the box and found a delicate necklace with a tiny key pendant hanging from it. "What does this key open?" I asked, running my fingers over its smooth surface. She didn't answer right away, just smiled. "You'll understand someday." I didn't press further. I knew she always had a reason for everything she did. At the time, I didn't know that this would be the last gift she ever gave me. I didn't know that just 3 months later, I would receive a phone call that changed everything. And I certainly didn't know that this tiny key would open the biggest door of my life. I got the call on a quiet afternoon in the middle of the month. When the hospital's number appeared on my screen, I knew something was wrong. My hands turned cold as I picked up, and when the voice on the other end spoke, calm, polite, yet urgent, I knew my life would never be the same again. Grandma Eleanor was gone. A sudden heart attack. She hadn't had time to call anyone, hadn't left any final words. The nurse said it had happened quickly, but that did nothing to ease the pain crushing my chest. I hadn't gotten to say goodbye. I hadn't gotten to hold her one last time. I hadn't told her how much I loved her. The days that followed felt like a blur. I ate because I knew she wouldn't want me to fall apart. I arranged everything, handled the funeral, greeted the guests, because that's what she would have wanted. But inside, I felt hollow. The house was cold now, missing her voice, missing the warmth in her eyes whenever she looked at me. The funeral took place on a gray, somber day, as if the sky itself mourned her loss. The church was packed. Former students of hers traveled from all over, some now doctors, engineers, teachers, all saying that she had changed their lives. I sat in the front row, my heart tightening as I listened to each story about her kindness and wisdom. And just when I started to feel like she was still here with me, just when I began to find comfort in the beautiful memories of her, they appeared. My parents. I sensed their presence before I saw them. My whole body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Then I turned my head, and at the far end of the church, they were walking in. My mother looked different. Her hair now streaked with gray, her face no longer holding the youthful look I remembered. My father had gained weight, but he still carried himself with the same self-assured stance. Except today, he wore a mask of feigned sorrow. They walked toward the front row, as if they had the right to stand there, as if their presence was about genuine grief for Eleanor rather than for show. My chest tightened. 10 years. 10 years without a single word. No letters, no phone calls. Yet now, with Grandma Eleanor gone, they returned. My mother spoke first. "Ellison." Her voice was gentle, as if nothing had ever happened. "We came as soon as we heard. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. I'm truly sorry for your loss." I stared at her, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask them why they were only appearing now, why, when I needed them the most, they weren't there. But I simply clenched my fists, holding on to my composure. My father let out a deep sigh, feigning sadness. "This has been so hard. I know you're grieving, sweetheart. But don't worry. You're not alone anymore. You're coming home with us." I felt the blood in my veins turn cold. "Home," I repeated, my voice sharp. My mother nodded, reaching out as if to take my hand, but I took a step back. "You're still not 18. You're still our daughter. Now that Eleanor is gone, you need family by your side." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. I could feel the weight of the stares around us, but I didn't care. I looked at them, their eyes filled with forced patience, but I wasn't the naive 8-year-old anymore. I knew they weren't here for me. They were here for Eleanor's wealth. I met my father's gaze directly. "Are you here for me, or for Grandma's money?" Silence. I saw my mother blink, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she masked it quickly. My father leaned forward, his voice firm. "Of course we're here for you, Allison. We're family. What are you thinking?" A real family wouldn't have abandoned their child without a word. A real family wouldn't wait until there was something to gain before reappearing. I took a deep breath, my voice steadier than ever. "I'm not going anywhere." My mother's expression darkened. "Allison, don't be stubborn. We are your parents." "No," I said, locking eyes with them. "The only family I had is gone." The truth of that statement lodged itself in my throat, but I didn't cry. Because at that moment, I realized I no longer expected anything from them. They had left me once, and I would never give them the chance to do it again. The tension in the law office's conference room was suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sitting at the head of the table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across from me, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed gray suit meticulously arranged the documents in front of him. Eleanor's attorney. I didn't know what to expect. A part of me felt empty, another part was terrified. But more than anything, I just wanted this to be over so I could leave. My parents sat across from me, wearing their usual expressions of forced patience. But I saw the flicker of anticipation in their eyes. They weren't here for me. They were here for what Eleanor had left behind. The attorney cleared his throat, turned a page, and looked at me directly. "Allison, my name is Richard Carter, your grandmother's legal representative. I am here to read her final will." I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. He picked up the document and began reading. I, Eleanor Grace Montgomery, being of sound mind and acting of my own free will, hereby declare this document as my final testament. My chest tightened as his voice echoed in the room. The will detailed various charitable donations Eleanor had arranged, small gifts to her close friends. But when he reached the most significant part, his voice slowed. All properties, investment holdings, bank accounts, and personal assets, totaling an estimated value of $52 million, are to be left entirely to my granddaughter, Allison Grace Montgomery. The room went silent. My parents froze. My mother reacted first. She shot up from her chair, her eyes wide with panic. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." My father narrowed his eyes, his voice turning rigid. "This is not how things were supposed to go. We are her children. We have a right to this inheritance." Attorney Carter remained unfazed by their reaction. He calmly slid a folder toward them. "I'm afraid neither of you have any legal claim to Eleanor's estate." He pointed to a document on top. 10 years ago, you both signed this, relinquishing all legal guardianship over Allison. Do you remember?" My mother's face went pale. "That was just paperwork. We didn't mean—" The attorney shook his head. "This is a legally binding document. Once you signed it, you forfeited any rights over Allison, including any claim to her inheritance." I looked at them, waiting for a glimmer of regret, a sign that they realized their mistake. But all I saw was anger and desperation as their plan unraveled before them. My father clenched his jaw. "She must have been manipulated. There's no way she would leave everything to a child like that." Attorney Carter remained composed. "Eleanor was an extremely intelligent and meticulous woman. Before her passing, she ensured that this will was legally verified by multiple witnesses and attorneys. No one manipulated her." My mother's hands clenched, her voice trembling. "We are her family. We deserve at least a portion." "No," I cut in, my voice firmer than ever. They turned to me, shock and frustration evident on their faces. I met their gaze, my tone calm but sharp. "Family is the people who stand by you when you need them the most. The ones who love you unconditionally. The ones who raise you, teach you, and hold you when you're hurting." I took a deep breath, gripping the small key hanging around my neck. The last gift from Grandma Eleanor. "You abandoned me a long time ago, and now I'm doing the same to you." My mother's eyes burned with fury. "Allison, you don't understand. If you don't share with us, there will be consequences." I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Consequences? Do you think I'm afraid? You taught me an important lesson. I don't need anyone who only wants me for what I can give them." My father slammed his hand against the table. "You'll regret this." Attorney Carter interjected before I could respond. "You have the right to contest the will if you wish, but I warn you, everything is legally sound. There are no loopholes to exploit." Their faces twisted with frustration. I knew they realized they had lost. Finally, my mother stood, her expression icy. "Mark my words, Allison. You may have all the money, but you will never have a real family." I looked at her, feeling a wave of emotion rise in my chest, but it wasn't pain or fear. It was relief. I stood, adjusting the necklace around my neck, and replied steadily, "I had a real family, and you were never a part of it." Then I turned and walked away, never looking back, because I knew this was the last time I would ever have to face them. I thought everything was over after the reading of the will, but I had underestimated their greed. A few weeks later, I received a call from attorney Richard Carter, informing me that my parents had filed a lawsuit to contest the inheritance. They claimed that Eleanor had been manipulated into writing the will, that she had been mentally unfit in her final years, and that an 18-year-old like me was incapable of managing such a large estate. I wasn't surprised. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. But I also knew that Eleanor had prepared for everything. We had all the necessary paperwork, medical records proving she had been fully competent when drafting the will. Every asset had been legally arranged and transferred. There was no loophole for them to exploit. The case was quickly dismissed. I assumed that after their failure in court, they would finally give up. I was wrong. That day, I was at Montgomery Enterprises, the investment firm Eleanor had founded, when the front desk receptionist paged me over the intercom. "Miss Allison, there are 2 individuals downstairs claiming to be your parents. They are demanding to see you immediately." I sighed, setting down my pen and leaning back in my chair. I was exhausted by this endless cat-and-mouse game. "I'll be down." As I stepped out of the elevator, my resolve hardened. I was no longer the 8-year-old girl crying on a porch. My parents stood in the middle of the grand lobby, drawing the attention of employees and clients alike. My mother had her arms crossed, impatience written all over her face, while my father stood tense beside her. The moment they saw me, they immediately approached. "Allison," my mother spoke first, her voice still carrying that same false sweetness. "We need to talk." I kept my distance, folding my arms. "What is there left to say?" My father stepped forward, his tone deepening. "We can't let things end like this. You know that." I let out a quiet chuckle, devoid of warmth. "End like what? The way you abandoned me 10 years ago without a second thought?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't speak like that, Allison. I know you're upset, but this isn't just about the past. This is about family. About what's rightfully ours." I raised an eyebrow. "Ours? What right do you think you have to anything?" I looked straight at them, my voice cold and unwavering. "You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money." My mother blinked, but didn't deny it. My father took a slow breath, then leaned in slightly, his voice lowering into something darker. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take more drastic measures." I tilted my head. "Drastic measures?" My father clenched his fists. "We could make this public. The media would love a story about an 18-year-old stealing her parents' inheritance." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you threatening me?" I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. "Go ahead, tell your story to the press." I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making sure every word carried weight. "Tell them how you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter without a word of explanation." My parents stiffened. "Tell them how you tried to deceive your own mother to take her fortune." My mother glared at me, but I wasn't finished. "Tell them how, for 10 years, you never once called, never once asked if I was alive or dead. And then, when Eleanor passed away, you came back, hoping to take what was never yours." Silence engulfed them. I saw it in their eyes, the fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the truth being exposed. They knew that if this story came to light, they would have no escape. Finally, my father was the first to turn away. His jaw tightened, and he muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. My mother lingered for a few seconds longer, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when she saw that I wouldn't waver, she lowered her voice. "Remember this, Allison. You may have the money, but you will never have a real family." I held her gaze, my resolve unshaken. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." She pressed her lips together, then turned and walked away with my father. I stood still, watching them leave the building. This time for good. I didn't feel heartbroken. I didn't feel regret. For 10 years I had waited for a family, but now I understood. I had never lost one. I had Eleanor, and that was all I ever needed. I sat in Eleanor's old office, a room I hadn't dared to step into since the day she was gone. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the dark wooden desk. Everything remained untouched. The stacks of neatly arranged financial books, the white porcelain teacup resting on the shelf, and the framed portrait of her hanging on the wall, her sharp yet kind eyes watching over me. Before me was a small wooden box, a sealed envelope resting on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. "To my dearest granddaughter, Allison." Her voice seemed to echo in every word. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. That breaks my heart, because I never wanted you to feel alone. But remember, even though I am no longer in this world, I will always be watching over you, in every step you take. The handwriting was slightly shaky, but still precise. I ran my fingers over the ink as if somehow she was still here with me. You have always wondered why your parents left you, and I know that question has hurt you deeply, but the truth is, they didn't just leave you. They tried to take everything I had. When they realized I wouldn't be deceived, they chose to walk away. But I have never regretted keeping you. You were the greatest gift they unknowingly left behind. I clutched the letter, my heart aching. Allison, I'm not just leaving you wealth, I am leaving you a legacy. I spent years building Hope Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping abandoned children just like you once were. I quietly used my resources to give opportunities to those who had no one to protect them. And now, I want you to continue this work. I blinked, my throat tightening. I know you have the strength to do this. You have always been resilient, intelligent, and kind-hearted. Do not let the past hold you back. Use what I have left you to change the world in whatever way you see fit. At the bottom, her final words stood alone. I have always believed in you, and I love you forever. Tears fell silently onto the paper. I spent the following weeks learning everything I could about the Hope Foundation. The organization's office was in a modest building Eleanor had purchased years ago. Inside, I met the dedicated staff who had worked alongside her. People passionate about helping children in need. One of them, Linda, a woman in her 50s with streaks of silver in her hair, approached and took my hand. Sweetheart, Eleanor always said that one day you would come here. She smiled warmly. She believed you were the only one who could continue what she started. I looked around. The walls filled with photos of smiling children, files documenting lives that had been changed, letters from those who had once been orphans but now had a future. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Linda shook her head. You're here. That's already a great start. And I decided I would make it happen. Alongside managing the charity, I also took over Montgomery Investments, the firm Eleanor had built over the years. Initially, the board of directors doubted me, a young woman with no prior financial experience. But I refused to let them underestimate me. I spent hours studying, attending every meeting, learning from the best in the company. I remembered Eleanor's words, knowledge is power. And I used that power to prove I was worthy of the role. 1 year later, as I stood before the board, presenting my plan to expand the firm's investments into more social impact projects, I saw something new in their eyes. Respect. I was no longer just an heiress. I had become a leader. I could have bought anything, but I kept Eleanor's old Toyota. It sat in the garage, covered in a thin layer of dust, but I never had the heart to sell it. Because it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of the values she had taught me. To live simply, work hard, and always help those around me. I wasn't just the inheritor of Eleanor's fortune. I was the keeper of her ideals. I am not just her heir. I am her legacy. Life isn't always fair, but how we face adversity defines who we become. Allison was abandoned, she was hurt, but she refused to let her past define her. Instead of being consumed by betrayal, she rose above it, turning her pain into purpose. A true legacy isn't measured by wealth, but by the impact we leave on the world. By continuing Eleanor's mission, Allison didn't just find her calling. She proved that we are not defined by what we have lost, but by what we choose to build. What do you think of Allison's journey? Did she make the right choice in standing up to her parents' greed? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and life.